Hello, and welcome to the final episode of Teen Talk Politics Made Simple, where we dive into the topics that matter most to our democracy and our communities. I'm your host, Mallory Hinck, and today we're going to explore something that's at the heart of any thriving democracy: civic engagement. More specifically, we'll be talking about why it's crucial for every American, adults, teenagers, and everyone in between, to get involved in the civic life of our country. We'll break down what civic engagement is, why it's important, how you can take action no matter your age, and hear from a few guest features. Whether you're just starting to think about these things as a teenager or you've been voting for years as an adult, this conversation is for you. So let's start with a basic question. What is civic engagement? At its core, civic engagement is about taking an active role in the life of your community, your state, and your nation. It's about participating in decisions that affect the collective well-being, whether that's voting, volunteering, advocating for a cause, or simply being an informed member of society. It's about more than just showing up at the polls every few years. It's about making your voice heard in a variety of ways. Now, I want to emphasize that civic engagement isn't just for a select few. It's for everyone, and you don't have to wait until you're 18 to start making these decisions. Teens, in particular, are a vital part of the equation. In fact, teenagers and young adults are often the ones who push the most meaningful change in society. Just look at the history of social movements, from civil rights to environmental activism. So whether you're 16 or 60, you can still make an impact. First things first, why does civic engagement matter? The simplest answer is that it's the bedrock of democracy. A democracy is only as strong as the people who participate in it. If citizens aren't informed, engaged, or active, then decisions are made without their input, and that's when we risk leaving important voices out of the conversation. Think about it. We have representatives in the government who are supposed to represent us. If we aren't engaged, they don't truly represent the people. One of the most obvious ways we engage in democracy is through voting, but voting isn't the only way. And sometimes it's not even the best way if we're not involved in other parts of the process. For example, local elections have a much more direct impact on your daily life than national ones, but voter turnout in those races is often much lower. Let's break that down for a minute. When you vote for president, you're voting on national issues like foreign policy, the economy, and healthcare. But when you vote for your local school board, mayor, or city council, you're making decisions about issues that affect your community directly. Things like public education, public safety, housing, and zoning laws. Yet in many areas, turnout for local elections can be shockingly low. For example, in 2020, the national voter turnout was just over 60%, but for local elections, the turnout can be as low as 15 to 20%. That's a huge gap, and it shows just how many people aren't taking advantage of their opportunity to influence the things that directly affect their lives. And here's the kicker. Civic engagement doesn't just stop at voting. It's about being informed, showing up to meetings, contacting your representatives, participating in community service, or even running for office yourself. The more we engage with the process around us, the more we hold our leaders accountable. It's like the old saying, if you're not a part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Now, let's talk about why it matters so much for young people, for teens in particular. You might think, I'm too young to make a difference, or politics is boring and complicated. I hear you. But the truth is, your voice matters more than you might think, and there's so much you can do right now to make an impact. Teenagers are often the ones who bring new ideas and fresh perspectives to the table. We saw that in the late 1960s with young people leading protests for civil rights, or, more recently, with the Parkland students raising their voices about gun control. When young people speak out, it can spark movements, create national conversations, and force older generations to take notice. Your activism can shape policies that will impact the world you'll live in for years to come. And you don't have to wait until you're 18 to start making a difference. You can volunteer with organizations, write letters to your local representatives, and attend public forums, or participate in peaceful protests. If you're in high school, you could start by engaging with issues that directly affect your school or community. Things like education reform, mental health, or even environmental action. Speaking of issues that matter to young people, let's dive into some ways teenagers can get involved in civic engagement. It all starts with awareness. Start by paying attention to local news, and make an effort to stay informed about issues that affect your community. If there's something you're passionate about, research it. It's easier than ever to find resources online, whether it's through news outlets, educational websites, or even social media. Once you're informed, you can take action. Join local youth organizations, participate in community service projects, or even run for student council position. Believe it or not, these small steps can lead to a big change. And for adults, civic engagement is just as important, if not more so. You've had time to establish your place in the community, and you've probably seen how policies or decisions made by others can affect your life. It's crucial to stay involved and to educate those around you, especially young people, about the importance of participation in democracy. One of the best things you can do as an adult is mentor the younger generation. Show them the ropes of activism, teach them how to advocate for themselves, and encourage them to take part in shaping the future. So how can we make civic engagement more accessible and appealing to everyone? The first step is removing barriers. Voting should be easy and accessible. There's been a lot of talk about making it easier for people to register and vote. Things like mail-in ballots, early voting, and online voter registrations are great steps forward. But it's not just about voting. It's about creating opportunities for people to engage, regardless of their age or background. Another thing we need to focus on is education. It's not just enough to vote. We need to be educated voters. Civic education should be a key component of schooling at all levels. Young students need to understand how government works, the role of civic institutions, and how they can make a difference. And for adults, there's always room for learning and growing. Whether it's attending town halls, participating in community meetings, or just having a discussion with others, we need to keep educating ourselves and those around us. Now, it's time we hear from two teachers you may know, Mr. Watson and Ms. LaVaz. We will also be listening to some seniors, Trevor Abel and Lexi Flynn, on their experience with diving into politics. First, let's hear what Mr. Watson had to say. He was asked, "How long have you been teaching civics/any politics-related club or ELO?" He said, "I have advised Harvard Model United Nations for 9 years. I have also advised Youth in Government for 2 years. Additionally, I have taught Freshman Humanities, World Studies, American Dream, America in the World, Civics, and many other electives over the 10 years I have taught at BHS." Then, he was asked, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is civic engagement for high school students? Mr. Watson said, "I would say 10. You are the next generation of leaders, and if you are engaged now, our community, country, and world will be better off." Then, Mr. Watson was asked, "What are the best ways for students to get involved with their government?" He said, "Students can attend school board meetings, select board meetings, communicate with the local and state representatives, and involve themselves in many varying civic organizations." Then, he was asked, "Can students really make a difference despite their age?" He said, "Yes. It requires persistence and the use of tools that you are well adept at using, like social media. You can make changes through positive waves, but you need clear direction." Then, he was asked, "How do you recommend students get involved in politics? Is there a certain number of sources they should be looking at to find information? Do you have a favorite unbiased news outlet?" Mr. Watson said, "Start networking and building connections. You don't know where one connection is going to lead. Get involved with organizations like the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire, political youth groups, Model UN organizations, etc. These are all great places to begin networking and building out your connections. Then, from there, you begin to create a route that you want to travel down. Honestly, the other big piece is critical thinking and continuing to sharpen your critical thinking skills. That starts with understanding what is going on in your community, country, and world. In my opinion, social media is a place that makes this harder because it is full of so much information that is not based on critical thinking. Strengthening your objective lens can be very powerful by looking at sources such as Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, The Guardian, DW News, and many others with an equal skeptical lens can help you read between the lines of politics. From this point, you can have conversations and approach individuals with a level head. This level-headed approach leads to an approachability and conversations that allow networking. Lastly, don't forget to build your own brand. Showcase your strengths and why working with you is always going to be a win-win. Now, Ms. LaVaz was asked a few of the same questions. First, she was asked, "How long have you been teaching civics or any politics-related club or ELO?" She said, "I've been teaching civics off and on for my entire career, so 24 years. I have also helped run Harvard Model United Nations with Mr. Watson." Then asked, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is civic engagement for high school students? She said, "Civic engagement is essential to our democracy. Student civic engagement at some level is a 10 for importance. I want students to learn how to engage in a meaningful way that works for them." Finally, she was asked, "What are the best ways for students to get involved in the government?" She said, "The easiest way for students to get involved is in their school government. I think that students struggle when they have to rely on their parents to get to outside activities. The hope is that after high school they will continue to get involved in their communities at college and then in their towns and cities." As demonstrated by Mr. Watson and Ms. LaVaz, politics are entirely within the grasp of high school students. To hear about how kids our age can truly begin to understand politics, let's hear from Trevor and Lexi. First, Trevor was asked, "What is your name and grade?" He said, "My name is Trevor Abel, and I am a senior at Bow High School." Then, he was asked, "How long have you been keeping track of current events and politics? When did you start to take an interest in the actual subject?" He said, "Once high school started, I began to get more interested in current political events. The earliest memory I have related to politics is watching the 2016 election unfold. Then, he was asked, do you participate in any school-related or unrelated activities that focus on American/international politics? Trevor said, I have been involved with Harvard Model United Nations for the past 4 years of high school and have been a head delegate for the most recent 2 years. I attend school board meetings and act as a student representative. I am a member of Student Senate and have been for all 4 years. I held a local candidate Q&A for other high school students to learn more about their candidates for my senior project, and I attended Boys Nations and Boys State last summer. Then, he was asked, how many sources do you look at when finding out information? Do you check multiple sources before you believe something? Trevor responded, oftentimes I default to getting caught up in just reading headlines, but oftentimes that gives me an incomplete and sometimes false impression of an event. Because of this, I try my best to consult at least 2 sources, ideally from opposite sides of the political aisle. Then, he was asked, do you have a favorite non-biased source to get news from? Trevor said, my favorite non-biased source is BBC. It is hard to find truly unbiased sources, especially American-based news companies. Because of this, I enjoy getting information from a news source that is watching American politics from the outside in. Then, Trevor was asked, why do you take such an interest in politics? And why should everybody care? Trevor said, our American form of government is like no other in the world, in that it requires the participation of its citizens in order to succeed and thrive. Without this participation, the government will fail to fulfill its role in serving the needs of the people. Additionally, we owe our simple participation to all the people who have sacrificed their lives to build the nation we have today. Then, Trevor was asked, do you believe that we can make a difference at such a young age? Trevor responded, 100%. One thing I learned recently is how accessible your elected officials are. If you have an issue in mind, you can email them out of the blue, and they will genuinely hear out your concerns. In that sense, you can walk into your representative's office and see if they have time to meet. Additionally, if the younger generation began to vote, the impact we would have would be dramatic. Right now, the younger generation accounts for the lowest proportion of registered voters in New Hampshire out of any age group. If we all participate by voting at large, we could be the deciding factor in many political developments. Finally, Trevor was asked, what would you recommend for a high school student that wants to get into politics, assuming they only know the basics or everything we've learned prior to high school? Trevor said, I recommend you go on the Secretary of State's website. They have a lot of good baseline information for voting. Now, let's hear from Lexi. She was asked, what is your name and grade? She responded, my name is Lexi Flynn and I am a senior at Bow High School. Then asked, when you turned 18, did you think about voting in the election? Why did you want to participate in the election? Lexi said, when I turned 18, I already knew that I would be voting in the election because having a say on who's in charge of my future is important to me. It was also exciting to be able to take part in such a nationwide event. I also believe that it is important to have voters of all ages voting for whatever they stand for and support. Then, Lexi was asked, prior to voting or any research, did you know which candidate you wanted to vote for? Lexi said, because there was such a clear difference in the candidates this year, it was easier to make my decision on who to vote for. Although there were points that I agreed with from both sides, I made specific beliefs a priority to support over others. Then, Lexi was asked, did you do any research on the candidates? The side you favor, the opposing side, or both sides? Lexi said, even though I believe the engagement in our government is crucial to a functioning society, I try my best to avoid news stations and political arguments. Many people use these platforms to stay updated, but I often find that they can be negative all around in my opinion. Because of this, the research I did before voting was very little, something that I would do differently in future elections. Then, Lexi was asked, to be able to vote, what did you do? How did you register? How did the experience at the polls go? Because usually they're pretty long. Lexi responded, I was able to quickly and easily register at the polls. I brought my ID, passport, and a piece of mail addressed to me, and the process went really smoothly. After registering, however, I realized I had to wait in a longer line that was organized by last name. When I checked in and got my ballot, I went into the voting booth and I cast my vote. It was hard to have a good strategy for this since the polls were pretty packed all day long. However, once I got inside, the process was really quick. Finally, Lexi was asked, what would you recommend to other students who may not know who to vote for or don't know where they stand? Lexi said, for people who are new to voting and unsure where they stand, I recommend doing personal research about the platform that each candidate stands for. This is a great way to avoid a lot of negativity and learn for yourself what you can and can't support. All right, before we wrap it up, I want to leave you all with a challenge. If you're an adult, think about one small way you can increase your own civic engagement this week. Maybe that's showing up at a local meeting, reaching out to a politician, or volunteering with a cause you care about. And if you're a student, pick one issue or cause you're passionate about and take action, whether it's researching, speaking out, or volunteering. You might think your voice isn't powerful, but all of our guests' opinions have proven that it is. Every voice matters, and every action makes a difference. That's all for today's episode of Teen Talk, Politics Made Simple. Thank you for listening, and an extra huge thank you to everyone who helped me create this podcast, including all of our special guests. If you're feeling inspired, share this episode with a friend, and remember, it's never too early or too late to get involved. Stay curious and keep learning.